Hey, what's up? So today commences the start of a 8-part series where I'm going to talk about the basic concepts of the hammer throw. These kind of translate to weight, but mainly hammer throw because who cares about weight throw? All right. So I did not a series, but one video for discus and one video for shot put for this, where I go very in depth. But hammer, there's so many different concepts and ways to think about it compared to shot or disc, and like just like a whole bunch of like it's more mental and more like physics, and it's just a whole different game than shot or disc. Um, so I'm gonna try and break it down as basic as possible, do a super deep dive. So I'm gonna try and explain it for someone who's just learning to someone who maybe even knows more than me, which is probably a lot of people because I was never the greatest hammer thrower. I threw 51 meters, looking like some dude that threw from the 1950s because I didn't really have a proper coach teaching me. And then once I started coaching, I started working with some absolute legends in the hammer field. Jim Driscoll for one. So, and I got to talk to a whole bunch of other coaches and actually learn how to coach, like how to coach hammer, and learn just a lot more than I knew when I actually was throwing hammer. I only threw hammer for 2 years and I threw 51 meters. I have no idea how. It is never going to happen again. And and I walked to my coach and I said, hey, can I just throw shot and disc because I ain't going to do anything with this hammer stuff. So whatever I'm saying, I'm laying that on the line. I was a 51 meter thrower. I wasn't some 70 plus meter Olympian, all right? I wasn't an Olympian in shot and disc either, but I was a damn sight better in shot and disc compared to hammer. All right, so take it with a grain of salt, okay? And I've worked with several really, really good to goat level tiered hammer coaches. So, this is mainly going to be stuff that they've said to me. All right, and yeah. So, and again, I'm gonna discuss all the viewpoints I know from different, because people think of hammer differently depending on who you talk to. There's no really right or wrong, just like with the shot, disc, or jab. It's just different viewpoints, but they accomplish the same things. A lot of people don't like the way Cameron Rogers throws, but she's Olympic champion, world champion, almost an 80-meter hammer thrower. Some people don't like the way Koji threw, and he's arguably the clean world record holder. Like it just depends on who you talk to. So I'm gonna be discussing viewpoints and stuff. So in this first video, I'm gonna be discussing how to hold the hammer and also the wind. Now the reason I'm doing the how to hold the hammer is because it's gonna take like 2 minutes. It's not a very hard concept, I hope. And if it is, maybe you shouldn't be a hammer thrower if you can't figure out how to hold the hammer. But not to be that kind of guy, but but so it doesn't take a dedicated video really, like an in-depth video how to hold the hammer. I don't even have a hammer handle. This is some fishing reel handle that I have just laying around, but it'll do. I hope it gets the point across. But I'm gonna go way more in depth on the winds, how to wind, the different types of winds, special strength for winds, and all that. So let's get started with the grip though. So the grip. Pretend that this is a hammer handle. All right? It's kind of shaped kind of like it in terms of like where you're actually going to hold it. So the hammer handle, imagine it's this without these two little knobs and then a triangle. All right? And it's either rounded or square. All right? That's dealer's choice. That's more of just a comfort thing. And basically, if you're a right-handed thrower, you're going to hold it with your left hand, and you're going to hold it on these knuckles. So you don't want to grip the hammer like this. It's more just going to lay in your hand like this, if you can see that. So your left hand's going to go on top, the right hand's going to just cup underneath it, and you're basically just going to let it rest. The reason you don't want to grip it is because, and this is going to be a concept for a later date, I'm going to be putting out a video weekly, which each part, all right? But basically, the reason why you want to hold it here is so you can let the length go, and so you can be a lot more relaxed. If you grip it, you're going to try and tense up. It's going to be short, and you're not going to get the benefits of having the hammer long. It's the equivalent of like throwing a discus, and instead of like out here and long, you're like this and trying to throw it. It's just not going to work very well. It's the same kind of principle in hammer. You want to keep that hammer as far away from you as possible. So to do that, and this isn't that long, and these knobs kind of get in the way, but you don't also want to grip it at the top of the handle. You want to grip it at the bottom. And the reason why is because when you go to the bottom, it will tend to point just a little bit and give you that little extra length. And it can hold it a little bit better and control it a little bit better. All right, so you just want to let it rest. Now, the better and better you get, there's stuff called like sticky, tacky, or chalk or whatever to help you so it doesn't slide off, because so once you start throwing like close to 60 plus meters and stuff, it gets kind of hard to do that. You also want a glove. If you can afford it, I would say a leather glove if you want to throw hammer for a long time, just because it's a lot more padding. It's a lot less cumbersome. And, it just looks cool too. But if you can't, just get a hammer glove. But throw with a glove. You can also throw a tape glove. I would recommend like Sean Donnelly's video on his YouTube channel. Just type in Sean Donnelly tape glove on YouTube, and there's like a whole video of how to do it. Gauze works the same way. People throw with gauze instead of a hammer glove. It just depends. I would personally get a glove because it's better than going through a whole bunch of tape and gauze and having to restock and buy. A glove will last you a long time if you buy a quality one. All right, so that's basically the basics for how to hold. Now, with that out of the way, I don't have a hammer, nor am I going to throw a hammer in here because I care about a lot of this stuff and I don't want it all to die. So, I'm going to be using a drawstring bag instead of a broom because I don't have enough room for a broom. And this will mimic the wire and the hammer a little bit better. Now, obviously, it's going to look weird because there's zero weight, really. There's nothing in this, really, because I don't want to break the drawstrings. All right, so it's not going to look, it's going to look a little weird, but just hear what I'm saying, and it'll just imagine that I actually have a hammer, and it'll make a lot more sense. All right, so let's start with why we wind. So rewind because it just brings momentum into the entry. And we're going to get to the entry. That's the third part? No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's the second part. I lied. Sorry, I had it written down. And so I'm not going to get too deep into that because that deserves its own dedicated video, because the entry it basically a make or break in your throw. If you don't enter right, you're screwed. The rest of the throw, it doesn't really matter kind of what you do. You're going to be screwed either way. You can do some stuff to fix it, but I'm not going to get in depth in that. This is specifically just winding. But when you wind, you got to keep the entry in mind, because the next part because like I can just do this and whatnot, and just like go like that, but you're not going to be able to enter from that. So whenever we discuss this stuff, you need to keep the next step in mind. So the next step with a wind is the entry into it. But we're not going to get into that, but just keep that in the back of your mind. All right. So there are a couple ways to wind. And I'm going to tell you my preference of what I like to teach, but some people just don't like to either teach it or can't do it or whatever. But I'm going to get this quick caveat out of the way. Women and men tend to wind a little differently. Women, because the 4K is so insanely light to them, most women can't even feel a 4K hammer at all, compared to a man with a 16-pound hammer, or a 7.26 kilo hammer. So women kind of can do whatever the hell they want. I'm going to be so honest with the wind, as long as it's smooth and the wire has tension. Like, I see women do the craziest stuff. Like, I've seen, like, Betty Heitler, famously, was, like, back here and was like that, and then entered. You know, like Cameron Rogers goes like just straight up and down. Some like go straight out like men do. It just depends, but as long as you're comfortable and you can just be smooth and have an orbit, knock yourself out, honestly. Now, I'm saying women can get away with it. Is it the most ideal thing in the world? No. So most elite women, now especially with elite women, actually you can do a little bit more. You can get away with a little bit more just because, you know, you are an elite woman. And you know, every person has their little nuance when they wind. But the basic concepts are the same. So let's start first with the wind I like to teach and the way that I was taught, correctly at least. So, in my opinion. So, I'm going to just briefly go over a counter. That's a whole separate video, but it applies to the wind. All right? So, basically the counter is you're resisting back and forth. All right? So, when the hammer's in front of you, your body weight needs to be back. When the hammer's behind you, you need to be a little forward, and you're basically counterbalancing the weight. If you don't do that, say I'm here and I throw the hammer in and I'm not sitting back against it, it's just going to yank me forward. And, you know, vice versa, if the hammer's behind me and I don't resist it, it's just going to pull me back and I'm going to be off balance. I'm not going to be able, when you're off balance, you can't produce power. All right, so basically, with the wind I like to teach is a back and forth. All right, so say I'm here, and you know, also one more thing with the wind, people, you know, like can swing, go here. You see someone like Koji, and he would start his like wind on the floor and then kind of go up with both hands. Some people start it outside. Some people put the hammer in between their legs and then go out like a weight throw. That's just more rhythmic and pendulum and whatnot. Like we'll get to that kind of concept in a later date, but I'm specifically just talking about once you get here, whatever you do, and you go, it's just gonna be, this video is literally just the wind part, not how you get there and stuff, because that will be an explanation for a later date. All right, but just so you know and stuff. But so with the back and forth wind, now that we got a little bit of a concept of what the counter is, or the concept of it really. Again, I'm going to do a whole in-depth video on the counter, and it's going to be one of my longer videos, where I'm also going to be explaining the push and pull of the hammer and stuff. I already have a video on that as well, but I never actually demonstrated it in person, so I'll be going back to that. But if you're super curious about that, I have a video on that already that you can just check out my channel. But basically, now that we got that little bit out the way, when you wind, I like to think I'm here. Let me lower this a little so you can see my hips. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm here. My knees are slightly bent. No, you can't see okay. My knees are slightly bent in a little quarter squat, nice and relaxed. I'm here, and when I do this, I reach back. And when you go, you want to think, instead of on the side or right here, your hands are gonna flip like this. So you're here, and you want to think out, not in front, out. So here, right here, and here. All right, and you notice when I'm doing this, my left wrist is going like this and my right hand is going like this. So I'm not here, I'm here. Now, you don't want your like arm to go out here. It's just your hand and then the wire. So I have my drawstring back, or the hammer. I'm here and I'm here. And you see how I'm not letting it really that much down? So this is an entry for a 4-turner. Because a 4-turn, you want the entry to be pretty flat. And then once you get better and better, you can start getting it a little lower and getting a little more of extreme orbit. But we're going to get to that with the conversation of orbit later down the line in one of the videos. All right? So, but for right now, let's just focus on the basic wind and just the concept of the motion of winding. All right? So, it's here. And you want to angle. So, by the way, I'm demonstrating as a right-handed thrower. If you're a lefty, you know, the right hand would be here, the left hand would be here, and you would be here. No, wait. Yeah. Sorry. It's been a while since I've done that. All right, and then you would be winding to go over your right leg instead of your left leg. But for the purposes, because I'm bad with my opposing hand on my hammer, I'm going to be demonstrating as a right-handed thrower. All right, so again, you're here and here. So from the side, you know, again, there's not really any weight for me to counter, so I'm just going to be a little extreme with it and pretend like there's actual weight in this, so you can kind of get the idea. But you want to basically not think side to side. So I don't want to see that, because that's very unstable. Now again, a lot of women do that because the hammer weighs nothing and you can just lock in immediately there. But that's also a little different type of wind. For the purposes of this, you want a little back and forth. All right, so I'm going to pretend like this thing weighs a lot. All right, so you're going to go here, here. And you see how I'm going here and I'm letting it flat and above my head. So from here and here. It's not side to side, it's back and forth. All right? So that's the basic concept of what I like to call, you know, a counter wind. Just to put a name on it, just to differentiate them before the different winds. All right. So the next wind is a side-to-side wind that a lot more women prefer, because again, you don't really. It's hard for a woman to counter a 4K because it just doesn't weigh that much. So, but that's for a separate video. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the side-to-side wind, instead of it above your head like this, what you're going to do is you're going to have it kind of feel like you're comb your hair. So here and here, and it's all going to be on your right side. All right. So it would be here and here, and you're countering side to side, and then you push in. All right. Me personally, for women, I don't mind that at all for teaching the wind. And you see a lot more women do that than men, especially when you're a guy throwing, you know, the college and higher weight, you know, 7.26 kilo or 16 pound. It's very hard to counter that way. You're a lot stronger from front to back than side to side. All right. And also it's really easy when you do this side to side to pull. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, but pulling is bad, but it's also can be good. It depends on how you do it. But we're going to get to that in a later video. All right. So those are basically the two types of winds. So as I like to teach it flat. So, but if you're a 3-turner and not a 4-turner, you do want to have a little bit more of a low and high when you wind, for the simple fact that your first turn, you have one less turn. So your orbit has to be at its high point earlier, where like a 4-turner, the first turn is basically just an extension of your wind, and is to basically get the ball moving. So your 2, 3, 4 is a lot you can put a lot more energy into those a lot easier. But also with a 4-turn, you have more time to build an orbit. With a 3-turn, you take away one extra turn. So you have to put in a higher orbit sooner, all right? So if you're a 3-turner, have a little bit more of a low and high point and not so flat, all right? So now that we got that out the way, to do this, being a little quarter squat, some people like to wind super deep. I say quarter squat and just nice and relaxed. And then really, really feel like you're tight in your core right here. Really tight. All right? And you don't want that thing pushing you around. You want to basically feel, so pretend that this part right here is a wire. When you wind, this wire has to have tension. So it has to feel like it's pulling and stretching. If at any point you're winding and it kind of just falls like that, and like there's like disconnect compared to just constant tension, you're interrupting the energy of the throw. So say I'm like this and I'm just like dropping it like that. You want to have constant tension, just like in the actual throw when you do your turns and the release. If you at any point during the throw or the winds, especially if you don't feel that wire stretching, that's a bad thing. All right, and I will say, so a right-handed thrower, you don't want to have, you want to feel like when you're winding that your right hand is winding the hammer, not your left. So let me raise this a little. So I'm here. You want to feel when you're winding. So you see how my hand can go like that. When you wind, you want to feel that hammer go like that. And I'm not doing anything with my left, but my right is pushing it. And you want to feel like this right hand is having the pressure on the hammer when you wind. Why do we want that? Is because when you go in and push, now you have a super solid right side, as compared to if you're trying to go and you're trying to wind a lot more with your left hand, you're going to have a tendency to pull instead of push, and now your left side dominant, and now your orbit is screwed up. It's going to be harder to counter, and you basically screwed yourself out of a lot of meters. All right, so really feel like you're right-handed dominant. Now, some ways to do this: one-handed winds. All right, so you're going to just grab a hammer and just here. All right, you can put your hand on your hip and just really feel that. And then with the left hand, and just really reach out. All right, wait, it'd be this way. Oops, sorry. It'd be here. All right. Again, kind of hard to demonstrate without an actual hammer. You won't get the full effect, but you can always just look up people doing drills and stuff.